因為個文件呢都係因為時間嘅安排上邊呢，我哋都係爭取盡快俾大家，但係我都知道呢，可能即係嗰個時間都係比較敏感，喺呢度呢都同大家呢就講聲，即係呢度我哋都係唔好意思。咁但係所以今日呢，我一陣間呢就先會有一個簡短嘅發言啦，隨後呢，我哋會有幾張簡單嘅投影呢。
Crucial commuting option for people. The current term government is determined to bring in a regulatory regime for online ride-hailing services. Our determination remains the same. We take a people-oriented approach. We put the public interest first. We want people to have more safe, legal, compliant, and diverse commuting options. In coming up with the regulatory framework for online ride-hailing services, we take into account 4 factors. First, Hong Kong is an international city. Locals and visitors need point-to-point transport services. Let's look at the visitor arrivals last year. The number went up 12% year-on-year. In the first quarter this year, visitor arrivals also grew by 17% year-on-year this year. This shows we have to pick up the pace in adopting technology for point-to-point transport services. Public transport in Hong Kong is also unique. 90% of daily commuters opt for public transport. The third factor is also something unique to Hong Kong, and that's the ecosystem for the industry. Taxis have been around for a long time in our city. They play the primary role in point-to-point transport. As the government introduces changes, we have to be mindful of the current landscape. And this includes the industry and the taxi drivers. Many of them are grassrooters, and that warrants extra attention from us. The fourth factor is that the government must take a responsible approach. We have to be careful in our policy formulation. People have a simple ask. They want point-to-point transport services. They want to be able to secure a ride. They want it to be an easy process to secure a ride. During busy hours, a ride is hard to secure. During a typhoon, during rainstorms, during inclement weather, it's hard to secure a ride. Or people may have a family member with mobility impairment. They want certainty in ride-hailing. They book early. They want to plan early. That's people's commuting need. We have been talking about taxis and ride-hailing cars coexisting with each other and complementing each other. We want healthy competition. Healthy development in this space will lead to a better outcome for riders. We want more younger drivers to join the trade to improve the service quality of point-to-point transport. We want more people to use the service. That way, the industry will become more robust and there will be more diverse development. For our framework as a whole, we want interested platforms and drivers to join this space. We will also require the future platforms to attract more taxi drivers to join them. Our vision and our purpose is to grow the pie. I want to stress one point. Coexistence and complementing each other is more than just a slogan. We can see that over 70% of cabbies pick up orders from ride-hailing platforms online. And ride-hailing platforms also try to draw cabbies to their platform. One existing platform has drawn more than 20,000 and possibly 30,000 cabbies to use their platform. Let's look at the Octopus Easy Ride service launched in April this year. In just a few days, active users saw a 180% increase in number. So for people to use a modern way to hail a ride, the demand for such service is keen. Taxis and ride-hailing cars can complement each other. That's why we're not talking about a zero-sum game for these two kinds of cars. We need diverse options. Some people want to book a trip in advance. Some people want to hail a car on the street. We have to look after the needs of different people. In our paper, we stress time and again that our strategy is to maintain control over the overall picture and assess the situation dynamically. There will be an overall control on the number. We want to maintain the user experience for riders. We will also consider Hong Kong's unique features. We have a highly efficient and heavily used public transport system. We have to be mindful of the carrying capacity of our roads as well. And that warrants a bespoke and dynamic approach to the management of our transport system. We have heard many views and we will continue to listen to views. Last year, we passed the primary legislation or principal legislation for the regime. Since then, our bureau has worked through different channels to talk to different stakeholders. We have been in touch with the taxi trade. We have heard from groups consisting of frontline cabbies. We have also been working with companies looking to take part in platform operations. We have held more than 30 sessions where we heard the views of stakeholders, and such work will continue. We will also analyze the feedback with care. We will seek to work out a solution and settle on a sensible figure for the overall control. I said we want to grow the pie so that we can strike a balance. On the one hand, we have the balance. On the other hand, we also want to provide drivers with more options so that we can improve their livelihood. So when it comes to the licensing or the issuance of permits for ride-hailing vehicles, we want to take a prudent approach. We will strike a balance. We cannot have too few permits. Otherwise, the public will struggle with hailing a ride, and there will be no guarantee about service quality. But then we cannot have too many permits, because that would have an impact on our roads. We have to protect the livelihood of existing drivers. Drivers need to make enough money, and we also have to make sure the pie is there and we can grow the pie. We propose a dynamic approach to monitoring. That number will not be set in stone. The public's needs and the capacity will change in response to tourism and also the new development areas, among other factors. So in assessing and setting an appropriate number, we also have to establish a mechanism to continuously monitor the situation. We will have to monitor market data. We will have to be dynamic in adjustment, and we have to make sure that the supply matches the demand. Chairman, our vision is to modernize transport management. Our vision for the future is to promote point-to-point transport service so that we have more younger drivers to join the trade, so that there will be greater vitality in the industry. Second, we want diversity. There will be luxury limousines, there will be barrier-free taxis or vehicles. There will be different options for people to meet their commuting needs. Third, we want safety going hand in hand with development. In public transport and in Hong Kong's broader economy and society as a whole, safety matters. As we drive innovation, we also have to ensure safety. Regulation and also insurance also need to go hand in hand. We will pledge a prudent approach as we guide the industry in taking a path that is legally compliant, professional, and in keeping with the times. Now I want to give the floor to Mr. Kirk Yip, the Deputy Secretary, to brief members on the details with the aid of PowerPoint slides. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Kirk Yip. Thank you. We amended the principal legislation on regulating ride-hailing services that was passed in October last year. There were some matters of principle where we already have reached a consensus. The Secretary has covered those points. Last year, we launched the framework. At that point, we set out the complete set of regulatory requirements. There will be all sorts of duties on the platform. Platforms will have to ensure proper and efficient services. They also have to perform due diligence on their own drivers. The drivers and the vehicles have to meet this requirement, where the drivers have to be the registered owners of the vehicles. And upon the request of the Commissioner for Transport, certain operational data will have to be submitted. And then on the age of the driver and the age of the vehicles, there are requirements. And then in 5 years before the application, there cannot be any serious traffic violation record, and the driver will also have to complete a course and pass assessment. The vehicles have to be registered in the name of the driver. There will be restrictions on the age of the cars. There will also have to be suitable third-party risk insurance for the cars. In the annex to the paper, there are details on the penalties for breaching different regulations. I want to briefly take members through these details. For the platform, we have a wide range of requirements. Now, for deploying vehicles or cars without the valid permit, for each such breach, for each such vehicle and driver, the platform will face a fine and imprisonment. For subsequent breaches, there will be stiffer penalties. Now, for the platform, they will have to ensure efficient and proper services. They also have to provide records of their operational data. For breaching such a requirement, the Commissioner for Transport will be empowered to hold an inquiry. If we see the consequences are dire, then we can impose a fine. For any subsequent breach, we can impose stiffer penalties. The Commissioner will also have the power to vary, suspend, or revoke the ride-hailing license for the platform. For drivers and the vehicles, when the drivers violate the rules when they don't have a valid permit, or the services are provided not via something other than a licensed platform, there will be fines and imprisonment. The driver's driving license may be revoked. The vehicle involved may be impounded. When we issue the permit for the driver and the car, conditions will apply. Breaching such conditions means that the Commissioner will be able to vary, suspend, or revoke the licenses. The Transport Department conducted a survey on the usage of ride-hailing services. So the daily passenger volume is roughly 818,000 passenger trips. 619,000 passenger trips are served by taxis, whereas for online ride-hailing services, that's 119,000 passenger trips. For ride-hailing services, every trip carries 1.67 passenger trip. So that means every day we estimate there is 114,000 trips or rides. Taxis and ride-hailing vehicles operate in distinct ways. Taxis are commercial vehicles. There are usually 2 shifts per day. A taxi operates on average 18 hours per day. For ride-hailing cars, those are private cars, meaning they're personally owned. Those cars provide the service during idle hours. From what we have learned from the market, drivers of ride-hailing cars work on a part-time basis. 60 to 70% of these drivers work for less than 20 hours per week. And also, many drivers in that space come and go every year. Now, assuming each ride-hailing car operates for 6 hours a day, that's roughly a third of that of a taxi. As for the draft regulation that we will submit and also the future licensing requirements, there will be more specific requirements for platforms and drivers. For the platform, they will have to set up a system to be connected with the transport department so that the data can be transmitted to the TD, so that the TD will get to see the operational situation and there will be regular assessment. We will also require platforms to adopt technology in performing due diligence. There will be facial recognition to verify the identity of the drivers. On the mobile app or the platform, there will have to be features providing customer service, rating, and complaint handling.
When it comes to vehicles, in subsidiary legislation, there will be regulations in relation to distribution, and the Commissioner will be in charge of this. When scrutinizing applications, the Commissioner will be responsible for the process. Arrangements will be made. We also recommend introducing a minimum operating requirement. During the validity of the period of licenses, ride-hailing vehicles need to perform a certain number of trips. When it comes to written test, taxi written test will be combined with the assessment of ride-hailing vehicles. Then there will be an enhanced integrated written test. As the Secretary mentioned, it's not just about a zero-sum game when it comes to taxis and ride-hailing vehicles. It's possible to achieve a triple-win situation among the public, taxis, and platforms. After regulation, taxis will enjoy a level playing field and a better operating environment. When it comes to regulated platforms, we will be able to enhance the carrying capacity of both taxis and ride-hailing vehicles. This will bring more new blood to the industry. At the same time, we can also encourage older drivers to upgrade and transform. There will also be more measures for combating white licensed vehicles or unlicensed hire cars, and this will better protect operators that abide by the law. Thank you. That concludes my introduction. Members who would like to speak, please press the button now. I'm going to read out the order in which members are going to speak. Ms. Christine Fong, Mr. Chao Siu Chung, Yu Ming, Tam Chen Kwok, Adrian Ho, Cheng Pui Kong, Captain Lam, Mr. Ray Wong, Lam Wai Kong, Mark Chong, Aaron Bok, Jonathan Leung, Chen Siu Hong, Andrew Lam, Chen Pui Leung, Lee Chen Kung, Alan Chan, Eric Yim, and myself, a total of 19 members. We have quite a lot of members lining up to speak, and I want to give members as much time as possible. 84 minutes, so we may have to extend our meeting. Each member 4 minutes, questions and answers included. Please allow some time for the administration to reply. Ms. Christine Fong, please. Thank you. The public have a growing demand for point-to-point transport services. We need to achieve complementarity. I'd like to ask the administration about the calculation basis when it comes to the quota. If it is not accurate or if it suffers from data lag, this will not be able to solve the pain point of being difficult to hail a car. In the end, the policy will just fall between two stools. The document touches upon dynamic assessment. I'd like to know the criteria. How frequently will the quotas be reviewed? When licenses are granted to regulated platforms, will international platforms be required to keep their data in Hong Kong? If it is not possible to dynamically and instantaneously monitor the data, we can only rely on reports submitted by platforms. These will be submitted behind the times. The government should establish a large-scale data center to collect more data and regulate taxis and ride-hailing vehicles, such as the peak hailing times, number of passengers, number of rides, in order to carry out more targeted adjustments. And I'd like to know how many licenses will the government grant to regulated platforms. There are buyout actions recently. If the operations are operated by multinational platforms, how will the government make sure that tax will be paid by the companies to Hong Kong? They need to make contributions to the public coffers in Hong Kong. Thank you. Secretary, thank you. I believe other members may ask similar questions, so let me get started right now. I need to make good use of the time. As set out in the papers, we attach a lot of importance to the regulation over regulated platforms and drivers. We need to take a people-centric approach. We are mindful of the importance of data protection. So when it comes to the experience of people calling for higher vehicles, we do understand we need to have a good understanding of the data. Based on our studies, the daily ride-hailing trips totals 114,000 trips. This is an important basis, and of course, another parameter is that when these ride-hailing drivers get on board, they are mainly part-timers. The period of onboarding time or operating hours may vary. They are highly mobile. That's why we need to make suitable arrangements at a good starting point. There will be a cap in the legislation, and we also need some data for us to carry out dynamic assessments and regular adjustments on data requirements. Some platforms are required to store data. Under our principal legislation, there are clear requirements. The Transport Department will also have an information system to monitor the provision of services as well as operation. So when it comes to dynamic assessments, we will have data being regulated. Thank you. I'd like to draw a line here. Thank you. Mr. Chao Siu Chung. I'm glad to see the administration has shared with us the purpose of the regulation. That is, user experience will not deteriorate after the legislation becomes effective. To this end, we need to accurately assess service demand. At the same time, we also need to make sure there will be sufficient active capacity. These two factors matter. I appreciate the government for mentioning in the paragraphs 17 and 18 two technical details. These ensure there will be sufficient carrying capacity on the roads. First of all, the Commissioner for Transport will decide on the quota appropriately. And there will also be minimum requirements put in place by the administration. I agree with these. First, on ensuring active capacity, we will take into account the fact that currently some drivers are working on some platforms. We will consider their past work performance as well as their working hours when deciding whether you will grant them licenses. The government has conducted a study. Ride-hailing vehicles account for about 22%, whereas taxis 78%. In the future, When ride-hailing is legalized, there will be more members of the public going for ride-hailing services. Have you taken into account this factor? Next, when it comes to dynamic assessments in the future, I believe you can work on two fronts. One, government review on the number of licenses granted. And when it comes to renewal arrangements, we need to reduce the number of dormant licenses. When they do not meet the statutory requirements, you need to carry out a review and revoke the licenses. For the first batch, will the period last 5 years? Can you issue licenses for a shorter period in the first batch? Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chow, for your support. Regarding your three questions, we need to handle, first of all, subsidiary legislation. Regarding your first concern, for drivers who have been providing such services, there will be more opportunities for them to be selected under the overall control and dynamic assessment. Under our subsidiary legislation, when the Transport Department grant licenses, there will be a few different options. 1, drawing lots. 2, according priority to vehicles of a certain class. Just now you made reference to a recommendation. We will take that into account in the future when we finalize our arrangements. What's important is that this needs to be set out under subsidiary legislation. Second, you also mentioned growing demand among members of the public when ride-hailing services are legalized, and of course, this is possible in the future. That is exactly why we need to more accurately consider the quota, and at the same time, we need room to make further adjustments in the future. This is very important when it comes to data regulation and surveillance. Next, when it comes to dormant licenses, some drivers work on a part-time basis. Some have got a license, and some may not be able to guarantee a certain number of trips or hours. This will lead to wastage of licenses if they are not going to provide services of a particular amount. We will consider setting minimum trips on a monthly basis after the legislation takes effect. In other words, even if a license lasts for 5 years, we will carry out review. And when the drivers fail to meet relevant requirements, we will revoke or suspend licenses. After Mr. Yu Meng speaks, I will draw a line. Thank you. I believe point-to-point transport services have become the main trend. This is seen in different countries around the world. I'm glad to see the relevant details being provided by the administration. There are heated debates when it comes to the number of licenses, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000, or even 20,000. I'd like to know the number of licenses that the government is going to grant. Some taxi drivers are worried that some taxi drivers will become ride-hailing vehicle drivers. Then there will be a shortage of taxi drivers. Some even worry that there will be insufficient carrying capacity on the roads. Some would prefer an incremental approach. The flag fall of taxis is subject to regulation by the government. Are there any mechanisms to prevent involution or destructive competition to take customers away from taxi drivers to ride-hailing vehicles? And I'd like to know whether a license could be linked to just one platform. Can it be linked to 4 or 5 regulated platforms? And I'd also like to know whether the administration has taken into account some people may buy even more private vehicles in order to run ride-hailing businesses. Then this will lead to more vehicles on the roads. I'm glad to see that the administration will accord priority to drivers who have owned private cars for a period of time. So I'd like to know how long the period that the administration is referring to. Secretary, thank you. Regarding figures, the government is continuing to tap the pulse of the community. We understand that different sectors of society are putting forward their own views. There is one common factor. If there are too few licenses, this will fail to meet public demand, and the policy will not be able to be implemented, and this will just lead to a failure. Some platforms refer to the number of drivers who have been onboarded. When there is no regulation, this will not be conducive to the development of the public transportation sector in Hong Kong. This will not be conducive to boosting the carrying capacity on the roads. This will also lead to an increase in load on traffic. That's why we will implement overall control with dynamic assessments. This is different from a lot of countries or cities around the world, such as the cities in the Chinese mainland. That is why the figures will not be set in stone. But we do need to provide for a figure. We will continue to monitor the operation of the market, and we will also be making suitable adjustments. When it comes to worries over destructive competition or involution, we will keep a close watch on the market, as this will not be conducive to market development. After all, there will be a cap on the licenses as long as the number is within control. Supply-demand dynamics will be adjusted. Ride-hailing vehicles are charging higher than taxi drivers. That is the flagpole. When it comes to destructive competition, we do have a mechanism to regulate or monitor such.
On the final point, I will be brief given the time. We don't want the permits for a driver to be linked to a particular platform. That would easily give rise to monopolies. There may be commissions down the road, and that would undermine diversity down the road. I will stop here, Chairman. Mr. Tam Chen Kwok. I support regulation of ride-hailing services so that ride-hailing services along with other forms of transport can develop hand in hand, and that will meet people's commuting need. The number of permits is top of mind for many. I'm sure the government has noted the concern. I hope the government can strike a balance between people's commuting need and the livelihood of drivers in deciding on the number of permits. I do have some point to make. There were cases of illegal workers from the mainland driving ride-hailing cars in Hong Kong. A driver arrested told me they made $17,000 over 2 months. I'm looking at the fines. For drivers operating a service without this license, they may be jailed up to 6 months and be fined $10,000. Is that enough of a deterrent effect? Now, for the land boundary control point in the mainland, they have areas dedicated to ride-hailing vehicles where people can wait and get on the cars, and that can avoid congestion. For us, we will implement our own regime in the 4th quarter this year. Is our own transport infrastructure ready, such as at our airport and railway stations? Do we have plans to set a dedicated pick-up drop-off point and waiting areas for ride-hailing cars? Secretary. The member mentioned illegal workers providing services through ride-hailing platforms earlier. That's why when we were looking at the principal legislation last year, we proposed a unique requirement for ride-hailing permits in the future. The driver will have to be the registered owner of the vehicle. With that requirement in place, we will adopt technology such as facial recognition technology to ensure that it's the registered owner of the car who is providing the service. That will ensure safety. And it's important for the drivers to comply with the requirement. In setting the penalties, I want to stress something. For a breach of the requirement to follow the permit in providing the service, there will be imprisonment and fines. This time we're also regulating platforms. And that means platforms will have a duty to make sure that they perform due diligence on the drivers. When a case involves a driver, the car, and the platform, there will be penalties for both the driver and the platform, so that will serve as a deterrent effect. We will treat cars used in ride-hailing service as private cars. Hong Kong is densely populated. Our roads are narrow. So restrictions on private cars, such as restricted zones, will be applied to the future operation of ride-hailing cars. Thank you. So they cannot enter the areas of the cross-boundary control point. Mr. Adrian Ho, I start by thanking the Secretary for her presentation. We have come a long way to arrive at where we are. The number of permits that will go out is top of mind for many. The government has expressed a willingness to hear from all sides. I'm trying to proceed on the basis of the government's numbers. So every day, roughly 120,000 rides every day. Let's say you issue 15,000 permits. Maybe just half of that number, meaning 75,000 ride-hailing cars provide service every day. So each car will have to offer 16 rides. Assuming you provide 2.5 rides every hour for every operating car, they have to operate 6.5 hours to meet the public's commuting needs. For ride-hailing cars, drivers tend to work on a part-time basis. They don't always work every day, so they may work for roughly 4 hours per day. After ride-hailing cars are legalized, most taxis may also go or join those online ride-hailing platforms, so people may hail taxis online instead. We want to strike a balance with the long-term interests of the taxi trade, so I'm just making a suggestion. I think 15,000 permits will be a sensible starting point. I believe the government will strike a balance. I am confident in the government. I just want to make one point, and I want to ask this question. Yesterday, the Transport Department launched an online application system for driving instructors, and the website saw heavy traffic. Not everyone wanted to become a driving instructor, but they just wanted to get the license first, just in case they lose a job and they can become a driving instructor. They just want to do it just in case. Now, whatever the number of permits, 15,000 or 20,000, people would think a ride-hailing services become legal. And people see that, and they may follow the herd, and they apply for the permit, but they don't end up providing the ride-hailing service. So there will be times when we will be short of capacity. I understand there will be a dynamic adjustment mechanism from the government, but if you do not make the adjustment often enough, you will see time when we don't have enough capacity. If people who have never operated or provided ride-hailing service, they simply follow the herd in applying for the permit. So in our permit system, can we introduce a scoring system? So for existing providers of ride-hailing services and those drivers continue to provide the service, if we want to ensure our capacity, can we prioritize these existing ride-hailing drivers with a track record over people who simply don't have such a record? Secretary. Mr. Ho has expressed his view on the capacity and other areas. We will gather more data and continue to hear from all sides. The turnover rate is high among drivers of ride-hailing cars. Even when they work full-time, they don't work all the time. So that's the feature of the ride-hailing service. We want to unleash the capacity of idle private cars. Mr. Ho wondered, aside from drawing lots, whether we can introduce a scoring system in issuing permits so that we prioritize drivers with a track record of providing ride-hailing services so that these existing service providers are more likely to provide the service. This perspective is echoed by other members such as Mr. Chao Siu-chung and Mr. Yao Ming. So these are points about the detailed operation. I'm open to views. We want to maintain overall control. Within that framework, we want to unleash the capacity of part-time drivers, while at the same time, we don't want people to just get the permit on a whim without offering the services. We keep an open mind about this. Thank you. Mr. Chen Pui-kong. I have a few concerns. Some platforms are more popular than others. Can we set a cap for each platform so that you don't see a concentration of drivers with one particular platform, whereas other platforms are neglected? Now, on data security and protection for the privacy of riders, I want to dig deeper into this matter. How do we strike a balance between ride-hailing services and taxis? We will have to effectively assess the data involved. So what kinds of operational data will the government require the platforms to submit to support policy assessment? These platforms are not local companies. Will the government require these platforms to store users' data in local servers? And when there's a data leak involving privacy data, will there be tough penalties to achieve a deterrent effect?
Thank you, Mr. Cheng, for your questions. You mentioned the quantity as well as data security. Just now in my answer to Ms. Christine Fong's questions, I touched upon this briefly. In our amendment bill, we provided for the requirement to keep record. The Commissioner for Transport is empowered to set down detailed permit terms and clauses which are related to the operation of the system. It also provides for the type of data to be stored. including the number of trips being cancelled, waiting time for passengers, type of complaints received. All these have a lot to do with the operation of a platform. The government, as a regulator, will be in a better position to make dynamic adjustments and carry out management in the future. Members also concerned about data and particulars being stored in the system by the platform. Under the PDPO, there is existing regulation or legislation to make sure such data collected by the company as well as its collection and handling need to be in compliance with the PDPO wherever the data are. This is subject to the regulation by the PDPO. We will proactively study this. That is, for these platforms to store data in Hong Kong, we will actively study the mechanism. At the same time, we also attach importance to data security. That is why we will incorporate clauses and terms when it comes to data security. Thank you. Captain Lam. Thank you. Ride-hailing services have become an integral part of the community. This is especially true to tech-savvy users. When we introduce a new policy or service, we need to strike a balance between existing service providers and new drivers. We need to provide a level playing field. I support this. We need to provide a people-oriented, safe regulation, complementarity, positive competition, and overall control and dynamic assessment. I understand that the administration will strike a balance between different factors, such as public demand, survival of taxi drivers, and so on. If there are too many permits being issued or granted, this will possibly crowd taxi drivers out of the market. I'd like to know what kind of data will be used as the basis. How is the government going to conduct dynamic assessments? The government said that they would accord priority to private car owners who have owned a private car for a certain period of time. Any reference year? Industry players said that they would expect that the threshold to be 3 years before a driver can apply for a permit. After the granting of a driver permit or a vehicle permit, your request a certain number of trips need to be provided. For example, dozens of trips every month. Does the administration have any concrete figures in mind? This will make sure there won't be any dormant permits in the market. This will also make sure that the permit holders will be drivers who regularly provide ride-hailing services. Industry players are worried about another type of white licensed vehicles. Some members mentioned that there are unlicensed hire vehicles heading north to provide ride-hailing services. I'd like to know whether there are any measures for toughening the penalties targeting white licensed vehicles. Thank you. Secretary. Just now, Captain Lam referred to an incremental approach, and he'd like to know whether the administration will take it into account. We'd like to say that we will make dynamic assessments and make appropriate adjustments as well. We will have a good grasp of the market data. In your second question just now, supply-demand dynamics, passenger experience, waiting time for passengers, or operation of industries such as the taxi industry, all these figures will provide us with the basis upon which we make a dynamic assessment. When it comes to an immediate or real-time assessment of the situation. We cannot say that when we will carry out our review at this moment. After all, we need to be dynamic. It's not practical to say that we carry out monthly assessments either, as a lot of data are involved. There are many factors at play. That is why we need to take into account the overall trend. It's about finding the sweet spot for the best time to carry out a dynamic assessment. This is our starting point, and this is very important. In paragraphs 17 and 18 of the papers, you mentioned the worry of the taxi industry. Will priority be accorded to private car owners who have owned a private car for a certain period of time, such as 3 years as you mentioned? This industry concern is similar to the concerns related by other members, such as those about carrying capacity, business record, and so on. The concerns are different, but they are largely the same. If we are going to use lot drawing in the future, we may add more criteria for priority selection. We don't want a lot of people to buy a lot of cars in order to apply for a permit. This will only add to the existing traffic on the roads. That is why we need to strike a balance. Regarding the period of owning a private car, we need to strike a good balance. Too long or too short will not be conducive to the development of the industry either. When it comes to dormant permits, we have an idea to set a minimum requirement as mentioned in paragraph 18. That is, our preliminary thought is dozens of trips per month. We need to draw reference from the existing landscape in the industry. Too few, it will be pointless, but too many, this will stifle the development of the existing industry. That is why we need to pick a good starting point in order to provide guarantee for the active capacity. Thank you, Mr. Ray Wong. Thank you. I support the details submitted by the administration. Just now I've heard from the government about dynamic assessment and dynamic granting of permits. Just now the government referred to dynamic carrying capacity. Traffic congestion may occur in piers or when there are concerts. I believe for regulated platforms, they do have such information. You can request real-time access to data so that you can plan together with the platforms. Is it possible to provide a buffer for the granting of permits? You need to adopt a dynamic approach. You should avoid setting a hard and fast rule or criterion. Otherwise, you will fail to provide trips to passengers. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for your questions. We do want to have a dynamic arrangement as well. We want to have a dynamic and flexible mechanism, but after all, we need to have a starting point. We don't have all the data from regulated platforms at present. This will be challenging for us to set down some rules now. When we have actual data to back our decision up later, such as any peak hours, regional mega events. This will lead to a surge in service demand for point-to-point transport services, and this will be hugely conducive to our dynamic assessments. Every day for ride-hailing vehicles, if they operate for 6 hours, they are equal to just 1/3 of the carrying capacity of taxis. And this is an average figure. If we take into account the onboarding time of drivers every day, we will see changes in the active carrying capacity on the roads. This will also lead to a difference in the supply of ride-hailing vehicles. We don't want our prescribed figures to act as a straitjacket which stifles the development of the industry. We will use the figures as a basis upon which we carry out dynamic assessments. I believe we will come back to the Council to share with you the findings of our studies, views related by the public, as well as the operation of the platform. Of course, it is important for the taxi industry to share with us the operation. Overall, frontline taxi drivers or ride-hailing drivers, we want to grow larger the pie so that they can get a slice of the action as well. This will better protect their livelihood and improve their life in return. Thank you. Mr. Lam Wai Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to see that the administration has provided more details when it comes to ride-hailing services. The taxi industry or ride-hailing vehicles are concerned about the arrangements. Whether the administration or the industry, point-to-point transport services are provided by taxis primarily. Ride-hailing vehicles act as a supplementary role. They mainly provide services in peak hours or in small hours of a day. What do we mean by taxi drivers being the main providers, whereas ride-hailing vehicles being a supplementary role? Some say that ride-hailing drivers work on a part-time basis and they do not work as long as taxi drivers. For ride-hailing vehicle drivers, after legislation takes effect, they may become full-time drivers. So will the number of permits multiply? I believe that the administration needs to take this into account. I'd like to share with you that when the economy is doing well, then more people will take taxis, and the number of taxi trips is indeed an indicator of economic performance. Now the government is going to grant permits on a year-long or multiple year-long basis. They will carry out dynamic assessments, but then when the economy is not doing as well, will the government revoke some permits? So I'd like to hear from the administration. What do you mean by dynamic assessments? When you are mindful of changes, will you act? Will you decrease the number of permits? Or are you not going to do anything? Based on these reasons, I believe that the administration needs to tread cautiously when it comes to deciding on the number of permits to be issued. It is best to take an incremental approach. You need to take baby steps when it comes to the implementation of this policy. Probably 1/3 or half of the number of taxi licenses. This is my personal recommendation. I'd also like to talk about penalties. ride-hailing services are considered illegal in the eyes of taxi drivers. Illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward, this is illegal. The penalty seems to be quite light. For regulated platforms, that is a ride-hailing platform, if a vehicle is found to be in violation of the requirements, there will be a fine of $10,000 and for repeated offense, $25,000. Will the first breach of the regulation or the legislation be one attracting a level 5 fine? There will also be an imprisonment term of 6 months. So who will be sent to prison? The permit holder or who? Well, not sufficient time, Mr. Lam. Ride-hailing platforms, this is what we're talking about. What about those who do not flag a car online?
因為
Secretary, please be mindful of the time. Other members also asked about the penalties, so I want to give a response on this. There are penalties for the platforms, for the drivers and the vehicles. Last year, we enacted the principal legislation. There was an amendment to the bill last year. We have provisions specifically to stiffen the penalties for illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward. We will be able to impound the vehicles longer. And when we fail to track down the car owner, and when there is evidence to the police suggesting that the offense of illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward is involved, the vehicle will be impounded. And that's an effective measure that we have proposed after consultation with the sector that will achieve a deterrent effect. We will have to take a multi-pronged approach. We want to provide point-to-point personalized transport. We will continue to crack down hard on unlicensed vehicles. We will also crack down on unscrupulous cabbies. We will give equal weight to all these efforts. Mr. Mark Chong. I have some concerns about the regulatory regime, the numbers, the regulation, the platform, and the enforcement, etc. Based on the government's figures, the capacity split of taxis and ride-hailing cars are 8-2. So if we take into account the operating hours of a taxi and ride-hailing cars, we will need 20,000 permits. The government proposes 10,000 to 15,000 permits in the paper. 2 years ago, the round table made 10,000 permits a condition for support for this regime. Back then, there was no requirement for the driver to be the registered owner. On that basis, more permits were needed, but to strike a balance, we decided to go along with 10,000 permits. Once ride-hailing is legalized, there may be new changes. More people may opt for ride-hailing services. So I think 10,000 permits should be the minimum. You cannot go below that. After the law is passed, we will need dynamic adjustments. We should review the number of permits at least 6 months afterwards. If people fail to secure rides after the new law is passed, that new law will be hard to implement. Under the subsidiary legislation, there will be a way for the government to intervene. Especially, there is a need for such intervention. There may be processing fees and there may be unreasonable special offers, and the drivers end up having to bear the cost while cabbies cannot make money. So everybody loses except the platforms. There's also a need to talk to the insurance sector. Taxis and ride-hailing cars operate in different ways. We have to make sure the operating costs are similar for taxis and ride-hailing cars so that taxis and ride-hailing cars compete on quality. And we also want to guard against ride-hailing drivers getting the permit purely on a whim. And then for all these penalties, the repeat offenders will not be deterred. We need key performance indicators on the frequency of enforcement actions. We need to arrange sting operations at the black spots of ride-hailing services. Secretary. Mr. Chong shared his views on the numbers. We note those views. On the other concerns, for future platforms, when there are drivers working for the platforms, Mr. Chong wondered what can be done about the fees. We will continue to work on that. We will continue to hear from all sides. When appropriate and when needed, we can impose licensing conditions. So that drivers get fair treatment. Most important of all, we want protection for the public when they access ride-hailing services. Mr. Aaron Bok. Ride-hailing service is a long-standing issue. The current government has risen to this challenge. I commend such effort. We're now looking to formalize ride-hailing services. There will be competition. There will be more options for the public. Now I have some observations. We have to be careful. When we try to solve one problem, we should not give rise to a new problem. So there will have to be a limit on the number. And we have to guard against bringing in too many new players. When we become excessively lenient with the conditions, you get too many new players, new problems will arise. Taxis are subject to many regulations. When you are too permissive with ride-hailing services, the market will be flooded with many ride-hailing cars, and then you will have vicious competition. On the number of permits, I will need more data-backed justifications, such as data specific to certain times of the day and district-specific data. Now, on this requirement about requiring the driver to be the registered owner of cars, I have some reservations. People have to take out insurance to take part in the business, and that insurance does not come cheap. It's $40,000 to $60,000. And when the insurance is involved, the operating cost will go up for these drivers. Since these drivers sign up for ride-hailing services, can we allow each car to have more than one driver? Secretary. Opinions on this matter are divided. Some want us to prioritize existing ride-hailing drivers with a track record of service. Others think there should be a requirement about how long someone owns the car before they should be allowed to become a ride-hailing driver. We need to strike a balance. Do we prioritize existing drivers, maybe requiring ownership of the car for 1 year or 2 years? We will have to think through these factors. And then there are vehicle owners who provided service in the past. And once the ride-hailing service is fully legalized, those owners may buy new higher-end cars. We welcome that. So there's much to think through. We issue permits. At the same time, we have to bear in mind that people want to join this service and they may want to buy new cars to join the service. So we have to strike a balance. On dynamic adjustments, sure, we can conduct more research into this matter. The situation changes by the day in public transport. The weather plays a role. The conditions vary from district to district. People's commuting needs change. It's hard to lay down something hard and fast for public transport. Once we have more data, we will be able to make projections and forecasts. And what about the requirement about the driver being the registered owner? Secretary, Mr. Bok raised this issue. When we were examining the bill for the principal legislation, we had a thorough discussion. Without restriction, a friend of the car owner or a relative of the car owner can drive the car. Sure, that approach can maximize the capacity of the car. But as we promote ride-hailing platforms in a legal way, the discussion back then was that we should take a prudent approach. We should take a more rigorous approach. Requiring the driver to be the registered owner has its merit. When we require due diligence in the future, that proposal will be easier to implement. Now on insurance. Insurers want the driver to be the registered owner of the car. That will facilitate the process on the insurance side. We note Mr. Bok's view. We have to be prudent when we make a start. Mr. Jonathan Leung. We're discussing the regulatory details for ride-hailing services. We have a capable government looking to address a long-standing problem so that we can legalize the service. I commend the effort. A long-standing issue for the taxi trade is that most of their business comes from the morning and afternoon rush hours. As for the other times of the day, business is limited. After COVID, people head home earlier. At night, business is slow for taxis. Now, when we rely on taxis as the staple supported by ride-hailing services, do we still allow taxi ride-hailing services during the slow hours? Now, on charging a fee, ride-hailing platforms offer discounts and special offers, and that has taken away a lot of business from taxis. Taxis are subject to regulations, and that includes the taxis' fares. Of course, it's the market when people are willing to pay above the market rate for ride-hailing services during rush hours. But what about the fees that are charged below the market fare or the taxi fares? How do we regulate that?
Secretary, thank you, Mr. Leung. We're going to launch the regulated platform, and we use the philosophy of overall control. We implement a cap. We will bring the situation under control as there will be a cap. And this will definitely be better than having non-quota at all, or having no cap at all. We have been hearing different views in society. They proposed different numbers of permits to be issued. Some members just now mentioned using a particular figure as the starting point. There is a consensus that we need to take an incremental approach. And the figures are far lower than the number of drivers who have provided ride-hailing services. We need to be concerned with the passenger experience of members of the public as well. Apart from rush hours, there are other impacts as well, such as weather, mega events, cultural events, concerts, regional situations, or the long weekend of the 1st of May. Some frontline taxi drivers told us that their business has picked up. This highlights the changes in taxi patronage. That is why we tend to adopt a cautious and incremental approach. We need to take it step by step. We have figures, and we also need to reference in values. Every 6 hours of operation of ride-hailing vehicles, on average, is just 1/3 of the carrying capacity of one taxi. This concept of capacity should be factored in when we decide on the number of permits in the future. Thank you. What about the statutory fares? Under existing legislation, there are applicable provisions when it comes to excessively low fares when involution happens. We will take into account supply-demand dynamics, and I believe this will prevent extreme cutthroat price competition or adjustments among different platforms. I also believe that this will incentivize different platforms to join. With competition, there will be better synergy, and we will keep our close eye on the operation of different platforms. Thank you, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you. I've been advocating an approach which prioritizes passenger experience and road user safety. At the same time, we need to provide a level playing field for taxis to complement with ride-hailing vehicles. We need to put public interest first. Members are concerned about the number of ride-hailing vehicles. Between November 2024 and January 2025, just 3 months, projections show the number of ride-hailing vehicles, and I believe such findings are just rough ballpark figures. It could act as a reference in value as a starting point. I'm concerned about smart mobility in Hong Kong, and I'm a chairman of the Smart Traffic Alliance in Hong Kong. We need to take into account how active ride-hailing vehicles are in Hong Kong. So you may have to consider this as well. I support the overall control and dynamic assessment, but the problem lies in how we can establish a suitable adjustment mechanism. I've been concerned about data sovereignty, data transmission, and data security of ride-hailing platforms. I recommend that the relevant servers be placed in Hong Kong, and they should be made subject to the local administration. This has to do with data sovereignty. the storage of data should be subject to the administration in which the data are stored. Data need to be subject to local laws. I hope that the government will seriously consider setting up a taxi fund or a taxi support fund. Regulated ride-hailing platforms should be levied to support the upgrading of the service quality of taxis, such as digital skills training, service enhancement, quality enhancement, and so on. I'd like to hear from the Secretary. What is the progress of such a fund? Thank you. Secretary, thank you. Thank you for your support for overall control, dynamic assessment, and adjustment. These are not pure slogans. Inside and outside the Council, there have been a lot of exchanges. You are the convener of the Smart Transportation Alliance. I believe there are many stakeholders of smart traffic initiatives. We value your views. How can we enhance the service quality of point-to-point transportation services? We need to facilitate complementarity when it comes to service quality. This is indeed our target and vision. I'd like to share with members, having a mechanism is important. While we may not have a mechanism today, this is our first step when it comes to having subsidiary legislation, and this will show the industry an element of certainty. This will allow different stakeholders and different parties to continue to ply their own business. We will keep some buffers so that we can make adjustments in the future. This is very important. Just now you touched upon data security and data sovereignty. I've heard you loud and clear, Mr. Chen. In this regard, we will actively study these issues, and we will also actively consider the views provided by members. Of course, this is a novel initiative. We hope to attract local, mainland as well as international enterprises to come to Hong Kong to provide services. Hong Kong is a metropolis. Many international tourists come to Hong Kong. We hope to provide convenient options for them to move around in the city, and I believe this is exactly what we can do as a metropolis. Regarding the Smart Fund, we have been thinking of different methods to provide support to the taxi trade, not least frontline taxi drivers. These drivers work in the front line. When it comes to helping them upgrade and transform, we'll consider how we can provide assistance from the administrative perspective or from the financial perspective. We have been thinking of levying passengers who have chosen ride-hailing services to set up a fund. However, when we floated this concept, it seemed that society had a view that they can provide support, but if members of the public need to chip in, there's much backlash in the community. So what we're going to do is that we may not adopt a mandatory approach to levy passengers. But this will not prevent us from providing more resources to provide assistance to taxi drivers or the taxi trade in general. We may provide assistance when it comes to training, checkups, and so on. We will try our very best to help the taxi trade. We will also provide more support when it comes to charging. We have already shared with members. We hope to share a piece of good news with members regarding charging facilities. We want to fight for more concessionary arrangements, discounts, which will provide more assistance to the taxi trade. Some questions are repeated questions, so going forward, I hope that the Secretary can select questions that have not been covered before. Thank you, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to speak on a number of permits. They aren't really questions, but rather my observations. Overall control, dynamic assessments mentioned in the paper, and I definitely agree. We need to take into account development density, transportation ecosystem, public road capacity, population, and so on. We passed the regulatory framework under the ride-hailing service bill last month. I believe these factors may not change significantly 1 to 2 months later. Of course, there's much discussion in the trade or in society, but the changes aren't about figures or data. But let's take a look at the reality when we talk about a dynamic assessment. If we set a high baseline when it comes to the number of permits, and this will lead to an increase in the number of platforms and drivers, and when you need to make a downward adjustment in the future, this is not practical. But if the number is on the low side, this will not be able to answer the demand of the public. That is why it's all about how swiftly you will make dynamic assessment or adjustment. I hope that the government will swiftly make adjustments. You really need to work faster, otherwise you cannot implement policies. After all, I value data. According to existing data of the government, let's not just look at how accurate it is, but when it comes to the carrying capacity, ride-hailing vehicles, 1/3 of that of taxis. At present, we have 18,000 taxis in Hong Kong. I'm not sure if the government has the latest data about this, but at the peak, ride-hailing vehicles, excluding online booked taxis, as we understand in the industry, 60 to 70% of taxi drivers receive orders or pick up orders on online platforms. So at the peak, how many orders are picked up by private cars? Let's not talk about whether they're legal or not, but I'd like to know how many orders have been picked up by private cars. As I understand from members of the public, even with private cars, the overall carrying capacity cannot be met still. So if the government has this figure to share with us, I hope that the government will not wait until we have subsidiary legislation before they can share this figure or find a way forward. In fact, we already have this figure. We have our own observations. I hope this will cause any unexpected shock to the taxi trade or ride-hailing platforms. Does the administration have this figure? If yes, I'm glad to know this. If not, I hope that the government will conduct assessments before subsidiary legislation takes effect. 6,000, 10,000, 15,000. It'd be difficult for me to explain to the public about this. Thank you.
簡單回應，因為
Secretary, Mr. Lam raised a key issue on data. Our paper sets out 190,000 passenger trips, and then for every ride-hailing trip, we take that as a basis, and then we arrive at the daily ride-hailing trips. So that's purely for private cars. And then there's another number, 690,000 passenger trips. For every taxi trip, we have included the numbers of hailing on the street and also orders received online. The daily number of taxi trips includes online taxi hailing. So when we say 114,000 trips, that's purely for online ride-hailing private cars. When we work out the capacity of online ride-hailing cars being a third of that of taxis, we also look at the operating hours of private cars. 60 to 70% of the taxis of ride-hailing services work for maybe 2 to 3 hours a day. Our paper assumes 6 hours, so the reality is below the level in the paper. And then for 10 to 20% of the drivers, they may work 5 to 6 hours a day. As Mr. Chen Su-hong said, we did a survey, and then we also got data from the platforms. We relied on more than one platform. We cross-referenced the figures, and then we arrived at our analysis. An average does not give us a full picture of the capacity. There's a full spectrum. We set a figure. We have to dynamically assess the situation. But we have to make a start. We want overall control. The starting point will be way below the existing number of cars and drivers. We have to be cautious, and we will be dynamically assessing the situation. Our meeting is scheduled to end at 6 p.m. We still have 6 members to go. So please observe the time limit, and I will extend the meeting to 6:30 p.m. Our members are on board. If there's no objection, I will proceed. Mr. Chen Pui-lan. I support the overall direction of the regulatory details. Something top of mind for many is the number of permits for ride-hailing services after the regime is in place. Passengers' experience should not be undermined. That should be a paramount principle. Based on the paper, I have done my math. Every day, every taxi operates 18 hours, and then we compare taxis with ride-hailing cars. So you need 3 ride-hailing cars to match the capacity of a single taxi. Now the capacity split is 78% to 22%, 78% taxi, 22% ride-hailing. So on that basis, we will need 12,000 ride-hailing permits to maintain the capacity of ride-hailing cars at 22%. We also have to be alive to another fact. Ride-hailing cars, only 10 to 15% of them can offer 6 hours of service every day. 60% of ride-hailing cars offer less than 20 hours of service per week. If we start on the basis of 30 hours of service per week, we will need 4.5 ride-hailing cars to match a single taxi in capacity. On that basis, and we keep this capacity split at 22% for ride-hailing cars, we will need roughly 17,800 ride-hailing permits, and that number will sustain the current capacity of ride-hailing cars. If we go for 25%, we will need 20,000 permits. we should maintain the level of capacity currently offered by ride-hailing cars, and that's how we can maintain the experience for riders. That's my observation. Now, the next point, insurance. The Federation of Hong Kong Insurers has put forward several proposals for the government to consider. The key point is, first, the premium is set based on the risk. Second, there should be enough competition in the market, meaning we need enough insurers in the market. And then the premium will be in a competitive range. Now, for these ride-hailing cars, they can serve two purposes. So you will need one policy for the private car being a private car, and then you need another policy for the car when it is used for ride-hailing. So there may be a vacuum in this process. So something for the government to consider is to find a way to minimize this risk of creating a vacuum. Of course, it's great to have a single insurer issuing both policies for the same car. So I hope we can achieve that. And we have to move at pace, because the insurance sector also needs time to find the basis for the premium and come up with the provisions for those policies. I'm grateful to Mr. Chen for his further analysis based on the figures in the paper. Insurance is a key part of the conversation. We want to send a clear message. We want safety through regulation. So taking out third-party risk insurance will be mandatory. Mr. Chen suggested an option. So maybe the driver can go to the insurer of the existing policy to take out another policy for the third-party risk policy. So that can be a direction we can look at. We want to avoid any gap. We want to keep riders safe. We need enough protection for the motorists, for the riders, and other road users. That's our overall principle. Mr. Michael Lee. Many members asked questions about dynamic assessment and reviewing the situation on a timely manner. On a timely basis. AI and big data can help the government assess the number of permits. We can look at the number of cars on the roads each day. There may be a gap between those cars and the number of permits. On long holidays on the mainland or special days, we can allow ride-hailing cars on the roads. So my questions are, the taxi trade told me during the morning and afternoon rush hours and on holidays, business is booming. So during those hours, ride-hailing cars can help out. Since we want taxis to be the staple with ride-hailing as the backup, can we scale back the involvement of ride-hailing services during slower hours? Ride-hailing platforms can offer lower fees, but for taxis, they are subject to the statutory fares. So can we impose a statutory fare for ride-hailing services too? Again, taxis are subject to a statutory fare. So when it comes to point-to-point services, taxis cannot offer a lower fare. Will the public be allowed to pay more for the service during rush hours? Secretary, we will dynamically assess the situation and adjust our approach in a timely way. We need the flexibility when it comes to public transport. During our discussion, different people put forward different views who put our heads together. Now, on whether we can introduce limits based on the hours of the day, on the days, or on the district. If we have too many restrictions, we lose the flexibility. After the regime is in place, once we have the data, we get a picture of the platforms. We will be able to adopt technology such as artificial intelligence or other urban management tools to analyze the data, and then we will be able to take a smarter approach with greater involvement of technology. But now, we're trying to set a number. For ride-hailing drivers and cabbies, both sides want certainty. They don't want ambiguity, especially in regulation. That's why we want to take a prudent approach in making the first step, and then we will dynamically adjust the approach. Other members have also commented on the statutory taxi fare, so I do not propose to go through those points again. Something for members' reference is that Octopus just launched the Easy Ride service. We have been monitoring the situation. We can see everything at a glance. You see taxis from fleet and non-fleet taxis. We can see all the people can see everything at a glance. People can choose for themselves. When people choose the premium options and when they book in advance, those fares will be higher than the metered taxis you hail on the street. So that's the market at work. Mr. Alan Chen. I support the proposal. I commend the government's effort to face up to a long-standing issue that has been around for 12 years. I also commend the Bureau's approach involving dynamic assessment and adjustments. We can start small when fuel costs are high, and then when passenger demand rises, we can scale up over time. Now I have some points to make. First, the commission. This has to do with drivers' livelihoods. Platforms may fleece drivers. Let's look at Oxford University's research from June 2025. More than 1.5 million Uber drivers were surveyed. Taxis are getting drivers are getting paid less and less, from £22 to £19. And the platform is taking a bigger and bigger share of the fees. So once the platform is legalized, then the platform will be able to take a bigger and bigger share of the driver's earnings, and that means things will be more difficult for the drivers. The mainland launched an Operation Sunshine some years ago. The requirement is that there will have to be real-time display of the money or the share taken by the platform. Sichuan also has a similar approach. So will the government consider a similar approach? Now on the servers. This is a key issue. On the 1st of September 2015, Russia implemented a similar law. The mainland's data security law also requires operators of critical infrastructure to store the data in the mainland. The EU's General Data Protection Regulation also has regulations on the cross-boundary transmission of data. Though the servers can only be in places recognized by the EU, so it's important to keep the servers in Hong Kong. Didi Chuxing tried but failed to get listed in the US. And then privacy data security became a factor. The listing application was halted. They had to go through the procedures in the mainland. Can we empower the Inland Revenue Department to verify the transactions and commissions of the ride-hailing platforms so that we don't lose out on tax revenue? Uber takes the double Dutch approach to evade the tax. Now, I come to my question. It's about dynamic pricing. During rush hours, ride-hailing platforms charge more. And even in late night hours, the fees also go up. But then during slow hours, the fee reduction can be up to 30%. Taxi drivers have their hands tied. Can we do something to fix this? Can we ensure level playing field? Can we allow taxi drivers to charge more or less by 20% to narrow the gap between taxi fares and ride-hailing fees? It's about fairness.
時間所限，我簡單。
In the interest of time, I'm going to respond in brief. Thank you, Mr. Alan Chen. We value data security and data protection, so we're going to provide for requirements when it comes to data protection, and we'll definitely actively consider the views provided by members. When it comes to tax, we have requested the platforms to be locally registered companies. They also need to have business registration in Hong Kong. I believe the IRD, the Inland Revenue Department, will act as a gatekeeper in this regard. For the companies making profits, they have clear tax arrangements. And these arrangements will be very clear, I'm sure. Just now, Mr. Alan Chen referred to one very good point. How can we provide a level playing field? How can we ensure fair fares? What about fare adjustment during rush hours and non-rush hours? I'd like to mention a point in passing. We're not going to interfere with fares, but an important point is that after the introduction of the regulation when it comes to platforms, in the future operation of platforms, we're actively considering encouraging or making it mandatory for taxis to be affiliated with these platforms. We need to give members of the public a fair option. There are different avenues to book a ride online. Taxi drivers can take part in them as well. And taxis should be allowed to agree on a fare together with the passengers. When they have listed a fare, and when passengers have confirmed the booking, then the fares will be shown on the platform. As I understand, the fares can be adjusted based on the supply-demand dynamics. I'm extending the meeting by another 15 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Eric Yim. Ride-hailing services are the way of the future. So I hope that the legislation will take effect within this year. Every day, 190,000 people, 114,000 trips. Many members have already said that 15,000 is an ideal figure, but I agree with the Secretary that we need to make dynamic adjustments and assessments. We can test the waters first. We can conduct a sounding hour exercise, and we can probably start with 12,000, and the figure can increase to 15,000 afterwards. When it comes to the fees for getting a permit for 2,500 cc, the annual fees are $7,000. ride-hailing vehicles have one more function, that is they can carry passengers. Will the fees stay the same, or will they be increased, probably $10,000 a year? Can the administration consider this, or can you explain to us what is in your mind? Regarding qualifications of drivers, no serious traffic conviction record. I have a concern. I'm concerned about the safety of female passengers who head home in the late evening in the Chinese mainland. Female passengers head home late in the evening while they were subject to, they had a dangerous experience. In December 2024, Baidu autonomous driving was being tested in Hong Kong. Can they be put under ride-hailing vehicles as well? Passengers of autonomous driving also need to place bookings online. Can it be included as well? Thank you, Mr. Yim, for referring to different areas. You have further analyzed the figures we have provided, and you have also looked into the ecosystem of the industry. I agree with you. Hong Kong has a unique landscape. 90% of commuters are using public transport. We have a highly efficient public transportation system. We also need to consider the local capacity of the roads. We are concerned about the livelihood of frontline drivers. They are grassrooters in Hong Kong. We need to take a step-by-step approach. Regarding vehicle permits, ride-hailing vehicles are private cars, and these cars have a full vehicle license granted from the Transport Department. Vehicle owners paid the fees every year, and our preliminary thought is that for those who can get a vehicle permit, we will use the cost recovery principle of basis to collect the additional fees of the vehicle permit. Just now you also touched upon the traffic conviction record, and we will study it later. Regarding autonomous driving, there are regulations at present to allow operators to conduct tests or even commercial operations in the future. The Transport Department is working on this. They are working on a roadmap, and they are also finalizing the arrangements or details. Regarding the way forward in the future, we can put our heads together, and we can also continue with our communication. Ms. Julia Lau, I agree with the principle of overall controlled dynamic assessment. I agree with the introduction of competition to enhance service quality, but alongside the introduction of competition, we need to make sure that this will be a level playing field. We need to ensure fair competition. This is the basis upon which we implement the policies. Some members refer to dormant permits. Will you consider increasing the amount of registration fees in order to deter dormant permits? Some visitors came to Hong Kong and make profits. They drove ride-hailing vehicles. I'd like to know what law enforcement actions are being taken to combat these illegal acts. Secretary, thank you, Ms. Lau, for your questions. Regarding vehicle permits, we charge a permit fee. One of the ways to do so is drawing lots, and we may charge handling fees. We'll consider this. Regarding any possible abuse, or for those who engage in unlawful or illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward for unlicensed drivers, well, if they do not have an identity card in Hong Kong, if they do so, that's already against the law. And that is within the purview of the immigration ordinance. This is outlawed by the immigration ordinance based on the figures we have at hand. There haven't been any recent offenses in this regard, but of course, we work hand in hand with the police force and the immigration department, and we also monitor the situation. Anything to add? No. Alright, lastly, myself. I have been trying to give sufficient time for members to ask questions in order that we will have a fruitful discussion. I believe that the administration has already heard members' views loud and clear, and all these are conducive to drafting the subsidiary legislation. Well, there is destructive competition, and there is also the race to the bottom when it comes to takeaway platforms for food. That is the platform workers. The administration should endeavor to make sure that the ride-hailing vehicles fares will not be lower than those charged by taxis. When it comes to data security, these are very sensitive issues. It's about the commuting or traffic pattern of individuals in a society. It's about the track of individuals in a community. And I believe these are serious topics that the administration should face squarely with geopolitical concerns in mind. Otherwise, when the travel patterns or commuting patterns of important people are leaked to others, then this will lead to serious consequences. I'd like to know how the administration is going to protect the interests of members of the public. Next, on flexible arrangements, flexible assessments. Just now, the Secretary referred to the principle of dynamic assessment. This is very important. This will ensure that no matter what happens, the administration will be able to assess the situation in a dynamic manner. Regarding the quota, 15,000, well, at least at this stage, the number of permits for ride-hailing vehicles should not exceed that of taxis. The figure is of great concern to society. As a starting point, you can set a starting figure, and afterwards you can review it, and if need be, you can make adjustments. This will ensure smoother operation in the future. This will also make sure that the ecosystem will be properly protected. So I tend to stay more conservative at this stage. Regarding dormant permits, that is for permit holders who have got the permits but they do not engage in such ride-hailing services, you do need to face this problem squarely. They probably just get the permits first, but they do not necessarily engage in such business, so you may have to carry out a review every 3 months. You may issue a reminder to dormant permit holders. If they do not work at all, then you will have to really handle these situations.
Now, I want to talk about enforcement, which is something that hasn't received much attention. Will we see unlicensed players? Taxi cabbies say they don't know what the identification marking will be like. The marking may be present only some of the times, because you can have a car with the marking taking orders from a source other than the licensed platform. So that's something law enforcement will have to be mindful of. And then someone may rent out their ride-hailing car with a permit to someone without a permit. We have to brace ourselves for such situations. Now, on the number of platforms, there is no restriction on the number of platforms. Will that lead to vicious platforms? So how many platforms are there? Once we hear from, after we get a reply from the secretary, and then we can wrap up the meeting. On identification markings, the rules will be clear. When we examine the subsidiary legislation, we will elaborate on that further. For platforms, we do not propose to set a cap on the number of platforms. There are, however, entry requirements for platforms. Paragraph 17 of the paper has this to say: certain conditions have to be met. This platform needs a track record in running ride-hailing services. They need to invest a certain amount of money here. They have to set up a company registered in Hong Kong. We have to ensure there is both experience and investment from the platform. These criteria will make sure that we will not be flooded by platforms. Of course, there will also be a rigorous vetting procedure. Any other business? I don't have any other business. I will adjourn the meeting here. Thank you.